Hello, it is Catherine Kirby, and I'm here with my Knitting and Crocheting podcast. And I know it's been over 3 months, and I'm going to explain to you why it has been so long. In February, I got sick. I think it was the flu, but with all the COVID stuff, and I'm learning too that radiation sickness from updating to 5G is kind of the same symptoms, whatever. Then my husband got sick, and it's his usual immune deficiency syndrome type thing from being exposed to Agent Orange. And this time he went down really hard. He got sick fast. Within the week, it was obvious that he might die. It was around the time that I had been watching the Fruity Knitting podcast, if any of you watched that. And Andrew, her husband, was very sick. My husband, Paul, made it clear that he wanted to be at home. I see patches back there. He did not want to go to the hospital. We had heard too many stories about people that said, I haven't seen my dad in a year. I haven't seen my husband in months because of COVID restrictions. And during that week, he really couldn't talk. He would try. He couldn't swallow anything but clear broth. I never left him, and it was a time that we will never forget. It was a time when God was very near, and he kept showing us he was very near. And the first week, it was just the two of us, nobody else. He dropped 20 pounds in about a week and a half, and he looked like skin stretched over bone. And he had a very vacant look in his eyes, like no emotion. And I had told a friend of mine that one morning I woke up. First of all, I'm not used to sleeping downstairs in this bed, but I woke up and there was this elderly man in bed with me, and I jumped up and I ran upstairs, and my heart was pounding out of my chest. And I thought, that was Paul. That's my husband. And I slowly came back down here, and he looked like death. And but God was very present. He showed us in so many ways. And I remember one morning I said to them, I wish you could hear the birds, but the sound of the oxygen machine drove out all the noise. I said, because you're missing the songs of the birds. And at that moment, a bird flew right up to the bedroom window and sang. And we could hear him loud and clear. It was a gift from God. I am a Christian. I can't separate that from myself. Doing a podcast, I don't want to pretend that I don't know about God's amazing goodness and his love. And I know there's a tendency when Christians are out in public to try to whisper because other people may not want to hear that. And since Paul got very sick and we went through what we did over 6 weeks, he had to be in a wheelchair. He had to use a walker. I mean, we celebrated the smallest of victories, like the first time I got him in a wheelchair, just to get him in there, get him out to the living room, bumping into things, knocking paint off the wall to get out here so that he could see springtime out the window. We celebrated every little victory. We learned to just be more vocal and more bold about being a Christian and about God's goodness. So one day the FedEx guy came into the yarn shop, and he is a Christian. And instead of just whispering, we're just talking about God and his goodness. And this customer walked up and said, "What garbage are you talking about?" So that's still not going to make me quiet about all God's goodness, and that my husband is well today and being restored. And after we finally thought that we had gone through the valley of death and came out on the other side, and he started to take the car for short drives, I came home from church one Wednesday night, and because it was really nice out, he had shorts on, and he was sitting on the bed with his legs propped up. And I said to him, "Oh my goodness, what happened to your legs?" They were swollen up to the knees. He said, "Well, yeah, I was going to ask you about that." Hey, ladies, gents, the the differences between men and women are startling. I was talking to Paul's sister, Debbie, and she was saying, now, I'm not putting down men, believe me, I hate male bashing, but just the differences in men and women. She was saying she and her husband, Bill, went to someone's house, and when they got home, she was commenting on something which she thought was big in their home. And he said, "Oh, I never saw that." So Paul had gone over to visit the neighbor, and you walk inside, she has a little table with a chair on each side, and she has a big wooden bowl in the middle of the table, and it has antique wooden kitchen tools in it. The little paddle that she got her bottom whacked when she was a child, an old rolling pin, which was so lightweight. All of these things are 90, 110, 120 years old. And when Paul came home, I said, "What did you think of all those wooden He said, "What? I never saw anything like that." So back to the swollen legs. He was going to ask me about that. I thank God that he had shorts on, that I was able to see. And I thought, well, calm down. It's not an emergency. He's not in pain. He's not short of breath. We don't have to go to the emergency room. So the next day, we were able to get an appointment with the pulmonologist. And I said to him, and I know if you're thinking, hey, isn't this about knitting? For those of you that have followed me, if you just kind of bear with me, I said to him, I wasn't sure if we should have come here anyway, it ended up being a long, involved day that Paul was sent to the hospital to get his leg scanned, and he called me. So I had come home to let the dogs out because Paul is just going to the hospital for tests, and the hospital's like 4 blocks from our house. And Paul called me and said, "Catherine, this isn't good. I have blood clots. Let me tell you, I didn't even know that I could cry like that. I didn't know that I could weep and wail, and from the bottom of my feet up, that I could mourn like that, because, I've been a nurse, I've been a doctor, I've seen plenty of bad things. And, Paul's first wife died of blood clot to the lung, and then he got the CAT scan done, and there were more blood clots. And so he is on blood thinner medicine now. He has a bald spot back there anyway, but the blood thinners are giving him patchy baldness. And I hope his hair comes back, because not that I care, but he's sensitive about it. So we praise God. We testify to him that he got us through this, that emotionally we are a stronger couple coming out of it, and that God did encourage me along the way. We read the Bible, and if I had a question, it seemed like within the day I'd turn on a program and there would be the answer. I read a book to Paul called A Walk Across America by Peter Jenkins back in the mid-70s. He actually came near this area. He was a college-age student who was just disillusioned with America. It was the time of the Vietnam Wars, the time of Kent State when students got shot, and he just didn't have any faith in America anymore, and he wanted to just walk across the United States and just see for himself what the people were like, and he wanted to discover himself, and boy, he sure did. There's a second book that I want to get But when Paul was sick and I couldn't really go anywhere or do anything, I went through everything in the house, cleaned out every cupboard, and I found this little book, and there's a poem in here. America is Great Because She is Good by Alexis de Tocqueville, written in 1850. I sought for the greatness and genius of America in her commodious harbors and her ample rivers, and it was not there. In the fertile fields and boundless prairies, and it was not there. In her rich mines and her vast world commerce, and it was not there. Not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. America is great because she is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. That did my heart good. I hope it did your heart good. So, I'll show you some things I've been making, and it may not be a complete continuation of 3 months ago because things got scattered and bags got put away, and in the time that Paul was sick, I didn't do anything. I thought I would. I'm not used to making 3 nutritious meals a day. And almost reminded me of the time when my children were little and you make breakfast, you clean up, and then it's nap time, and then it's lunchtime, and then you clean up, do the laundry, whatever, and then it's supper time. And I was recovering from being sick and I was exhausted, and I made a very simple garter stitch scarf, and that was about it. It was not a time of productivity. And after maybe a month or 5 weeks, I was completely exhausted. And you felt like the moment you sat down, Paul needed fresh water, this or that. And one day I just kind of had a meltdown, and I missed my bed upstairs because it's comfortable and this bed isn't. And I said, I just want to go upstairs to my own bed. And I went up there and crashed, kind of pulled the covers over my head, retreated from the world, slept for 3 hours straight, came down here, and Paul said, I haven't had lunch. Right back into it. So I did finish fingerless mitts. They're out of a Interweave Knit magazine, and I made them for Paul. I tried to pick men's colors. This have a very simple hole for your thumb. This is out of Olympia Super Bulky yarn, and I was happy with them. I don't know that men need a knitted thumb. And I started the cowl, and I ran out of the yarn, and I don't think I have any more. So it's either going to be a thin cowl, or I'll pick up stitches and add another band of color and below. I'm not sure. So I was playing with fancy yarns that don't sell. And some years ago, people used to make necklaces, and all they would do was do a crocheted chain, or you could do a knitted I-cord, and each one is a few inches longer than the other. You can then take a big bead with a big hole and slip it over there, and when you wear it, you can slip the bead up and down. But I also had thoughts of putting it like this, trimming these a little bit, and just putting a nylon cord around it. So I don't know. Could also be a headband that you could tie. So I'm just kind of experimenting, and I made them in small sizes for a little girl, and I thought they looked cute. Leslie, a friend of mine who's 20 and works in a pet shop, and I told her, Oh, you just have to watch the movie Ugly Benny about the pet shop. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll see my dogs with their bandanas on. She made this one for Hartley. And I did notice that he came in and he had burrs all through it. And she made this one for our new dog. Yes, Sandy's the second new dog. Now we have Marcus. And again, his picture's on my Facebook page. This was on Memorial Day she made these, and she made a dark purple one for my little dog Sandy. And these dogs were delighted. I thought they would paw them off. No, they all sat around with their little bandanas on, looking so happy and content. I took them off once the weather warmed up, and all that Leslie did was crochet a bandana and tied it, and it works perfectly. I just slipped it over their heads. But yeah, they all sat there looking proud, like, oh, look at me. So thank you, Leslie. That was so nice. I also finished the sweater called Buttons by Dana Gibbons, called Buttons Cardigan number 606. I think it was called that because she had different color buttons on hers. I just chose purple. But this is Sirdar Fair Isle. It's a DK weight. I love the patterns. It's soft. It's an acrylic yarn. And it's a top-down pattern. And it was 2 skeins. And you start with the shawl collar in garter stitch and then come down. And so I finally finished it. I think this is the 2T size, I think. 2 skeins, 2T. And, you know, sometimes you're going along great, and then you change the ball of yarn and the pattern really switches. I guess if you wasted some yarn, you could figure out how to keep it right. It has garter stitch band on the bottom and the sleeves, and it was just good to get it finished. I had so many things sitting around that weren't finished, and you start to feel guilty. I had shown you a pumpkin in the past, and it was done with Line Brand Da Vinci. This, I decided to make another one because the pumpkin just kind of sits at the yarn shop and people like it. And I got to thinking, in 3 months, it's actually fall. And when you're a yarn shop, you should be knitting ahead. So it is time to knit pumpkins. I have a yarn called Bonita, which is slightly fuzzy, and a yarn called Classica. And I pulled from the top and the bottom and used 2 strands of the Bonita and 1 strand of the Classica. And it's done on a fairly large needle. But I think with stuffed things, you actually want a smaller needle. And I did kind of overstuff it because I've found out in the past that if you don't, you end up with a droopy thing. So right now you can see some of the stuffing coming through, but I think that'll be okay. For the top, I use the old time ruffle yarn that if you just use it as a yarn, it's actually like a super bulky. And this is a free pattern called Knit Pumpkin by Sara Heckman. And you can make it all sizes. And there it is. So this pumpkin I had on my podcast probably a year ago, and it never got felted. I'm at the process now of putting in the yarn that goes down. Even without that yarn, the pumpkin still kind of has its natural sections. And I think that I need to pull these all tighter. So you can see when I pull that tighter, I have more of a, I think I have a better look when I pull it tighter. And this is the same ruffle yarn. And by ruffle yarn, I mean that they made the ruffle scarves from. But in the pattern, she has these big, pretty leaves. She puts 2 of them on the pumpkin. I use the full skein of yarn. It's Louisa Harding Amitola Grande. It's a silk and wool yarn. It felt great. One time in the washing machine. I guess I could have put it in again, but I thought it looked really wonderful. And she said don't overstuff it. But because of the way I stuffed it, I have some bald spots up here. So I'm definitely gonna put the leaves. I'll show you the next time. And it was a perfect color for this. So the next time you see it, it will be tightened up. It's definitely a bodacious pumpkin. I mean, I really, really like it. And as much as I liked this one, then when I finished this one, I'm like, well, I really, really like this one. So I need to make some solid pumpkins, and I'm gonna make some gourds. And these ladies that stopped in and got this stuff to make the pumpkin, the one said, oh, gourds are so creepy with all those warty bumps. And I thought, well, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder and your experiences. I always remember my dad growing gourds and bringing them into me. So I have good memories with gourds. And what have all of you been making? This is a yarn that competed with Rasta, the big, thick, soupy, super bulky. And I want to do the next pumpkin out of this. I just think it is going to be so beautiful with these rich colors. It's like purples, grays, rich oranges, ginger, pumpkin, purple, goldens. So I can't wait. And you know, some of the stripes depend on how big it is. If I had done a smaller pumpkin, these color stripes would have been much, much bigger. But because I did it this way, they're small. So there's my pumpkin. And this one is by Marie Mayhew. It's called Woolly Pumpkin. Felted woolly pumpkin. You can get it on Ravelry, and I think it's about $5, the pattern. I have to be careful because at the shop one time, someone that worked with me did a tag and they put like $5, and somebody came in and insisted on buying that knitted up sample for that price and really argued that, hey, you had a price tag on it. It said $5. So it should say pattern is $5. I've shown this before. I just have to make up my mind to finish the sleeves for my husband. So we had a lot of cool weather. We had weather last week even down in the 40s. We're in Pennsylvania, and it would have been a great time for a long sleeve cotton sweater. People that are growing things are finding out that things were just sitting because it's just too cold for them to grow. I was experimenting a little bit with bandanas because I think sometimes when people wear a shawl, they just like the front part of it. So I had this yarn laying around the shop. Nobody was buying it. It's one of those ladder yarns. I had a lady one time came in and asked for a railroad yarn. And I started here crocheting. I did a couple stitches and just started increasing a little bit each. And then I decided to put the fringes on it, but you definitely wouldn't have to. That is Marcus. Come here, Marcus. Marcus is diabetic. Marcus is blind. Marcus is also a very, very good watchdog. He's a puggle, maybe mix, but come here, Marcus. Come here, buddy. His owner, come here, honey. Whether because of the diabetes, come here, honey, or what, let's see here. There's Marcus. That he, I don't know if you can see the white opaqueness of his eyes, but he is a excellent watchdog. Just excellent. Let me see if I can get my camera back here. Yeah, and so I feel safer because, you know, somebody came in the backyard and he barked and let me know. It's nice. So I want to make some more of these, maybe some without the fringes, maybe some with. You have to decide how long you want or do you want something that comes around in hooks? And I really like it. Very simple to make, only takes a couple hours to make. You could do it a couple ways. You could do it this way and keep coming down and decreasing or increasing, but just a little bandana. And eventually I'll write up this pattern. I found some other yarns I thought would be pretty. This is a discontinued yarn called Louisa Harden Glisten. And there are some yarns that just are very thin, almost lace weight, and have sequins in that can be put with another yarn, like this yarn. And I'll tell you as a shop owner that yarns like this are kind of a poor investment because they just don't sell. And yet I like them. You just have to know what you're going to do with them. And oftentimes they can be combined with other yarns to make them look good. And maybe this wasn't the right color, I don't know, but this is a skein of that very yarn, the Aton. It's like a purplish, pinkish sparkle. And the KFI Paint, which is an acrylic yarn. Oh, my camera's slipping down, sorry. It's an acrylic, worsted weight. They give you a free pattern, and it's a shawl that I had started since last year, and it's a boomerang shawl. And I wouldn't have had to fringe it, but I decided to. And boomerang shawls can be worn so many different ways, probably at least a dozen. And I try to pick out the color that I like the least and do it. And I've said many times I could put my shawl pin there. I've never been disappointed in picking the color that I like the least. It was a fun pattern. I had it started probably since last year. Really, I told my husband, maybe I don't have a very good following in my podcast because I don't follow the way everybody else does their podcast. I don't like calling my beautiful things objects. I don't do the acquisitions. Well, for one thing, I own a yarn shop, but I haven't really found out that people really love it when I say, well, this box came in this week and this is what's in it. I just want to be myself. And maybe people think, well, she didn't even finish She didn't even finish what was on her last podcast. I was tuning in hoping to see this, and then 9 months later I'm showing you. I'm sorry, I am very imperfect. If anything, my husband being very sick taught me just to laugh more. We went to church yesterday, and we had invited a friend the week before, and he was like 40 minutes late. Well, this week I fell asleep, and I got there, I missed Sunday school, and I get there, I'm late for church, and here's our friend is there turning around saying, "What happened?" And I thought, well, if you get to know us long enough, you'll find out we're very imperfect. But what made me laugh is we had communion. And after, well, first of all, they had the little cup with the wine, and it had a cup under it. And I thought, I don't need 2 cups. I just took 1. Then I saw that my husband had 2. And then I noticed that the second cup had like a little tiny piece of bread, really tiny. And I said, oh, I missed my bread. By that time, I saw the man that was giving them out was looking like, wait a minute, somebody didn't get their bread. And I started giggling. It was me. And then after communion, we have chairs in front of us with like wrought iron rungs, and I never noticed there's a little round circle on like every third chair that is where you put these little plastic cups. I never noticed that. The chairs in front of us were made from our wooden pews, and they had a wooden ledge that had little holes in for their cups. Well, my husband is reaching up saying, here, give me your cups, I'll take them. And I'm thinking, well, they have their own. Anyway, my husband reaches for them at the same time I reach for the hymn book. And these little plastic cups went sailing through the air. And I just got silly, and my husband got silly, and we couldn't stop laughing. And people around us started giggling. And yeah, communion is supposed to be a solemn time, and we're giggling. This is Perris Shawl, Perris, and it is a Louisa Harding cotton DK weight yarn called Giardino. So right now they're running a free pattern when you buy 2 skeins of the yarn. The yarn is $20, and if I do the second skein, it's going to be a traditional triangular scarf. It's a really pretty yarn. It has these kind of like whitish marbled areas, and the pattern isn't hard. I just kept making it hard by not following it. But using 1 skein, I have like a boomerang shawl, and I like it because you could drape it and put your little pin or whatever on it, and you could put it however you like it. But I think I'm going to stick to the one skein. And maybe that's kind of hurting business and not selling people 2 skeins, but they have beautiful colors out. You can go to knittingfever.com and look at the Louisa Harding yarns, and they have just gorgeous spring colors coming out in this yarn. There is a little book club at the shop, and we just finished The Giver by Lois Lowry, and I had read some of her children's books, but this was very, very different. And it made me think a lot. It's about a society where there is no free choice. Everything is decided for you. So there really isn't any unhappiness because you can't make bad choices. But when the 3 of us in our little group sat down and discussed what we all got out of it, it made me even appreciate it even more. Because a lot of times in Christianity, people will say, well, why did God have to give us free choice? I mean, he knew we were going to mess up. There's the little ones. There's the little one's little bandana. So it really made me think a lot. So then we found out there's 3 other books, and we're eager to read all 3 of them. This is Cairns Yarn. Cairns is a place in Australia, and this is the Millie wrap. And again, when I tell you that I have a lot of things that aren't finished, I think most of you that watch me know that 3 years ago our house flooded and all my projects just kind of got put away. And now I'm just getting them out, and it's almost like Christmas time. But also when you get them out, it could be the colors are discontinued, the yarn is discontinued. This is obviously going to need blocking. So those are my points. And there are some really rich purples in here and reds. I think it shows up on the camera kind of a lot more brownish than it really is. It's actually very vibrant. So this is it, the Millie wrap, and I'm on my second skein now. It does curl, so I'll have to block aggressively. I would think that this could be reversible, that you could have your garter stitch side and your stockinette stitch side. It's kind of interesting because Sharon Kuhn and I at the shop often tend to be working with the same yarn. When I did the Amitola Grande, Sharon was working on a scarf with the Amitola Grande. I was working on a scarf. But there's various projects right now started with this. This is the lacy ribbed wrap or bolero, and it's like a rectangle, and I just started the lacy part. It is a free pattern, so I'll end up with a rectangle and I'll sew it. It is by Kelly Maher, M-A-H-E-R, right. And it's a fun yarn. It's a flat yarn. And the colors change and they keep you really engaged. It's just a fun yarn. And there's a really cute market bag that you can make out of this yarn called Market Square. And I thought I had something else with it, but I guess that will be another time. So my friend Holly is making tote bags, T-O-L-T, I think. Again, it's a free pattern and you can use all different weight yarns, but you're basically making like a big square or rectangle, and then you fold it. So it looks like a right-sided triangle here and a right-sided triangle here. So I'm doing the garter stitch version out of a super bulky tape construction yarn called Aruba. And I'll line it. And this is a great project to just put. I'm sorry I have a shirt that keeps pulling up, and I'm just getting too old for tops that show the belly. Another interesting thing in my life is I'm buying a knitting machine. I'm paying on it monthly. Holly came over the other day. We set it up, and then we got to the final stage where you put the yarn through, and we just kind of got to a big question mark. But once I get it going, the woman that owned it before actually spent almost $500 for a special carriage that it will go by itself. It will knit for hours. As long as you have the yarn, it will knit. Like, how wonderful is that? Yep, there's the little buttons cardigan pattern for the little sweater. And that is a pay pattern, I think $7. And here's another color of the Cairns yarn. This is kangaroo. Oh, this is heart reef. They do have very pretty colors in this. And that might be about it for now. There's more to show, but I don't have it all with me. And oh, here's something. When we talk about combining different yarns, using bling yarns or yarns you don't know what to do with, this is a pattern called Over the Willamette. And we were going on a vacation, and I took a book along with me, a fiction book, and sure enough, it was a book about the Willamette area. And I'm like, oh, this is really strange. This is a crochet pattern by Jen Wolf Kaiser. And I decided I had made one and it came out really small. And I thought something wasn't right here. But I decided to combine some different yarns. And then I think it got packed away. But you know what? Oh, I don't know. I was going to say, I don't know. I have to think about it. That's a little bit too roughly. It's not supposed to be like that. I think it's maybe the differences in the yarn I use, that's maybe a fingering weight and that's a DK. So the one got thicker. But again, lots of things around this house to finish. I'd like to end with this verse from the Bible, Colossians. A friend of mine, an elderly lady that used to sit and sew and make the cutest little things. She once did a whole set of the alphabet. She would make little animals, little llamas. She'd spend hours. And she would go for doctor's visits and just give these things out. And I told her that I think the good works that we do kind of go ahead of us into heaven. This is Colossians. In all the work you are doing, work the best you can. Work as if you're doing it for the Lord, not for people. Remember that you will receive your reward from the Lord, which he promised to his people. You are now serving the Lord Jesus Christ. That's Colossians 3:23. So I thought that was very beautiful. And so, do it all for the glory of God, even if it's crafts, because God is interested in everything you're doing, and he's very interested in you. So keep shining. It won't be 3 months by the time I do another podcast. It'll be quicker than that. And shine, baby, shine. I'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.